Japan may be known as the land of the rising sun, but it still has its fair share of horror hiding in the shadows. In this video, we'll be exploring some of the most unsettling urban legends and ghost stories that get shared around after sundown. Several of these entries are first or second-hand accounts, while others are overviews of folkloric creatures and rituals. They were all found on the Japanese website, 2chan, and were translated into English by my fellow YouTuber, Phantasmal Wretched. If there are other Japanese legends you'd like me to cover, or even legends from a different country, let me know which in the comments section. Now, without further ado, ikimashou. This is an allegedly true story that happened to my friend in Japan. He told me this story a long time ago, and the exact location escapes my mind, but he relayed this story to me with so much conviction that I can't help but believe he was telling me the truth. What I do know is this incident definitely resulted in 2 deaths, and he himself had to be questioned by police over and over. It all happened when my friend and 6 of his co-workers at his part-time job were driving in the Chugoku region, the westernmost region of Japan's main island, Honshu. They were driving out to see a suspension bridge. The 7 of them were split up into 2 cars. My friend was the driver of the second car and had 4 passengers with him. In the first car, which was driving ahead of them, were the manager and a couple. Although they set off in the morning, due to the many stops they had to make along the way, the sun was already setting by the time they made it to the bridge. The suspension bridge ran across a very deep valley in the middle of a mountain. As they approached it, the sky began to drizzle and fog began swirling around them. There was an open space just in front of the bridge. If the weather had been good, they would have just parked their cars there and crossed the bridge by foot. Then they would have come back. The other side of the bridge was a dead end, and the structure had simply been left there for sightseeing purposes. The moment the first car reached the open space, however, it came to an abrupt stop. Seeing this, my friend hit the brakes, and the second car came to a screeching halt about 10 meters behind the first. "What are they doing?" my friend asked his co-workers in the second car. They had no clue as to why the manager had stopped. For some time, those in the second car just sat there, looking on. A few minutes passed, and the first car made no attempt to move, so my friend reached for his door handle. He was going to hop out and see what was going on. Right at the same time, the couple who were in the back seat of the first car suddenly jumped out in unison. Something wasn't right about their expressions. Alarmed, my friend too got out of his car and tried to walk over to them and ask what had happened. But the couple, with their hands joined, started sprinting, and, in a flash, they climbed over the guardrail at the edge of the open space and threw themselves over the other side, down into the valley. The 4 of them in the second car were completely astounded. They all rushed to the guardrail and looked down into the valley below, but because of all the fog, they couldn't see anything at the bottom. None of them could believe what had just happened, and they all stood there in a daze. Soon, they remembered that the manager was still in the car, and they rushed to check on him. The manager was still sat in the driver's seat, his hands grasping the steering wheel so tightly that his knuckles were white. Under his breath, he kept muttering the same phrase over and over. "Mustn't go. Mustn't go. Mustn't go." He wouldn't respond to them. There was nothing else they could do but call the police. The authorities soon arrived on the scene, and the delirious manager was taken away in an ambulance. As you can imagine, the couple who jumped over the side of the mountain were later found dead at the bottom. The rest of the group had to endure a seemingly endless interrogation by the police. In the end, with no evidence of foul play and nothing to go on, the police concluded that the pair had simply decided to end their lives together. My friend later paid a visit to the manager at the hospital. Fortunately, he seemed to be back to normal. He asked him what happened that day at the suspension bridge. why did he stop the car so suddenly? The manager told him that as they drew near the bridge, a girl dressed in an old-fashioned kimono appeared out of the fog in front of their vehicle. The startled manager immediately hit the brakes. The girl wore her hair short and was dressed like somebody from a historical drama, or maybe even someone from the Meiji period. Of course, this creeped him out, and he wondered if maybe she needed help. But before he could react, he noticed that his car was now surrounded by a whole group of children, all dressed in a similar fashion to the girl. Being a superstitious man, the manager sensed that he was in danger, and quickly began chanting a mantra. According to him, the children who surrounded the car all joined their hands together and started singing, Kagome, Kagome, the bird in the cage. At the same time, the manager heard the children's voices in his head, saying, "Come with us, come with us." The manager gripped the steering wheel and began chanting, "Mustn't go, mustn't go." Next thing he knew, the couple in the back seat behind him flew out of the car, joined their hands with the children, and, together, they all started running towards the guardrails. Of course, the police didn't believe my story, the manager told my friend. Hell, I'm not even sure I believe it myself. You don't have to believe my manager's experience, my friend told me. But one thing's for certain. That was indeed how that couple died, and I, for one, do believe him. An interesting thing to point out is about the song Kagome that the children were allegedly singing. Kagome is a children's game in which a group of children hold hands and walk in a circle around another child in the center. While doing so, they chant the Kagome song. Everyone in Japan knows it. When the song stops, the child in the middle tries to name the person standing directly behind them. The song itself has been a subject of much interest due to its mysterious lyrics and ominous tune, and several disturbing theories exist about it. One theory states that in olden times it wasn't uncommon for poor families to sell their children in order to survive. According to the theory, they would use the Kagome game as a type of ritual to decide which child should be sold. At the end, when the players finish singing the line, "Who stands behind you now?" whichever child stood behind the person at the center would be the one to go. Since this was considered the will of the gods, nobody could dispute the decision. I'm not sure how well known this one is, but it's one that's always tickled my fancy. The bath game, sometimes known as Daruma-san, is a game that dates back a long way. The game itself carries with it huge risk, but also the potential for huge reward. According to legend, by conducting a simple ritual, you can summon an entity known as Daruma-san, who will play a game of cat and mouse with you. The reward for winning is that you'll be blessed with amazing fortune. This one's not for the light-hearted amongst you though, as a lot of bad things can happen to you if you decide to play the game, including death. Here are the rules. To play, you'll need a bathroom with a bathtub. Only one person can play this game at a time, but don't worry, you won't really be playing alone. Step 1. Wait until nighttime, just before bed. Step 2. Fill up your bath with water and turn off all the lights. Step 3. Take off your clothes and get into the bath. Make sure your body is facing the faucet. Step 4. Close your eyes and begin to wash your hair. Step 5. As you wash your hair, repeat the phrase, Daruma-san fell down. Daruma-san fell down. Make sure to keep repeating this the whole time you wash. Under no circumstances should you open your eyes. Step 6. If everything's gone according to plan, your head will be filled with the mental image of a woman standing in the bathtub. In this mental image, she'll slip and fall face first onto the tap, gouging out her right eye. she'll die in the process. Step 7. If, after this mental image, you feel a presence in the water behind you, do not turn around or open your eyes. Instead, ask aloud, why did you fall? Step 8. There'll be no answer to your question. Just let it linger in the air for a moment. Then, with your eyes still firmly shut, step out of the bath and dry yourself off. And this can be dangerous, so be careful not to slip as you get out. Step 9. You can now open your eyes. Head to your bedroom. It's time for bed. Do not turn on the bathroom lights. Do not drain the bath water until morning. Do not re-enter the bathroom after you leave, and make sure to close the door behind you. Step 10. Go to sleep. The ritual is now complete. As soon as you wake up in the morning, the game will begin. The ghostly figure of Daruma-san will follow you all day. You can tell who she is by her stained white clothes, her long black hair, and the fact that she's missing her right eye. Her left one is open and bloodshot. Throughout the day, you'll occasionally feel her presence creeping up behind you. When you do, quickly look over your right shoulder. When you turn to look, you probably won't see her. As the day goes on though, she'll get closer and closer. Do not let her touch you. If you sense that she's getting too close, shout, "Tomare," meaning stop. Shout this while swinging your arm in a chopping motion. Then, run. You've just stalled her and bought yourself some time. Put as much distance between you and her as possible. Use this Tomare command sparingly though. It'll become less effective with every use, so only say it when you really feel the need to. The game will only end when you manage to catch a glimpse of Daruma over your right shoulder. When you finally do see her, immediately shout, "Kita," meaning I cut you loose. Say this while swinging your arm like before. If you manage to do that before midnight, congratulations, you've won the bath game, and good fortune should be yours, for a time at least. Should you fail to spot her by midnight and cut her loose though, then I'm afraid you've lost the bath game. Daruma will never stop following you. You can run as much as you like, but she'll always be close behind, and eventually you'll need to sleep, giving her the opportunity to catch you, either in person or in your dreams. When she catches you, well, that's the end. Don't try to play this game more than once. On the second playthrough, she'll start at the same distance you caught sight of her last time, and you won't have enough time in the morning to get away. My old high school was ancient, around 120 years old. It had had so many renovations in the past that its layout was a total mess. Even though it was a one-story building, it had a staircase that led up from one end of the corridor to the ceiling, and inaccessible doors embedded into the walls for reasons lost to time. The oddest of all of these incongruencies, though, was the watch cabin. From the outside, it looked like a normal country house. Inside was a sleeping area, big enough to fit 8 tatami mats, an old-style telephone, and a small kitchen area. I never knew why it was known as the watch cabin though, until the night of this incident. My home was far from my school, so I'd sometimes stay overnight at a friend's house who lived more locally. One day though, I couldn't find anyone who could let me sleep over at their place, so I decided to spend the night in the disused watch cabin. Another person, a friend of mine, was going to stay there with me. We were in high spirits as we spread our futons on the floor, feeling like we were on a mini school field trip or something. We were talking and eating our dinner, when, unexpectedly, the old telephone started ringing. It made us both jump. Nobody was supposed to know we were here. I picked up the receiver. On the other end of the line was a school janitor. he was checking in on us. He said he was worried because we were staying at the watch cabin by ourselves. How he knew we were staying there was beyond us. Whichever janitor it was, he must have seen us sneak in or something. He told us not to mess around too much and so on. The usual spiel. Just as I was about to hang up the phone, he says, "Oh, and one last thing. Make sure to close the curtains on the west side of the cabin. You got that?" Without thinking too much, I said sure, and hung up the old phone. When I thought about his words in more detail, however, they didn't make much sense to me. I didn't remember there being anything notable on the west side. "What's he talking about?" we asked each other as my friend and I looked out the west side window. What we saw there was a sinister-looking, old well, encircled by a hemp rope, like the kind you might see at a shrine. Up until that moment, neither of us had ever noticed it, because it was hidden away in a secluded spot, wedged in between the school building and the cabin. I felt a shiver run along my spine as soon as I laid eyes on it. "I don't know what it is about that well, but it's kind of creepy, isn't it?" I said to my friend. She agreed with me. We went to bed after rearranging our futons so they were side by side, making sure they were closer now than before, both of us feeling a little unsettled. I fell asleep quickly. I don't know how long I was asleep for, but I awoke with chills around my shoulders. I looked around and noticed my friend was missing. The cabin itself didn't have a toilet, so I assumed she had gone to the teacher's boarding house to do her business. I waited and waited, but she still hadn't returned. I opened the door and looked outside, but there was no sign of her. I felt uneasy as I went back inside. Without thinking, I opened the curtains on the west side of the cabin. There, outside, I could see my friend, standing in only her underwear beside the old well. Her hands were groped around her waist. It looked as though she was trying to pee. At first, I felt a little shocked, but then closed the curtains and tried to go back to sleep. Still, I felt that something was off about the way she was moving. I stood up, opened the curtains again, and looked out. I almost screamed when I realized what she was actually doing. She wasn't groping her waist. She was trying to tie a rope around it. I just watched on in complete disbelief. When she had finished tying the rope around her waist, she bent down and began tying the other end to a large stone by her feet. I became so scared I couldn't utter a single word, couldn't move. The next thing I saw was a pale, white hand come slithering out of the well. At first, the hand was moving as if it was searching for something, and then stopped once it found the rope on the ground. My friend stood there with her head bent down, almost like she was in a trance, still and unresponsive. The white hand slowly began to tug on the rope, attempting to pull the stone into the well, to drag my friend down into it. I was paralyzed with fear. It was then that my ears were filled with a shrill ringing which pierced the silence. It was the old telephone. Immediately I came to my senses and felt my body become lighter. Before I knew it, I was out of the door and running for the well. I grabbed a hold of my zombified friend and dragged her back inside the cabin, shouting her name over and over. She soon regained her senses too, and began sobbing heavily. Relief washed over me, and I began sobbing with her. We both knew we needed help, so I grabbed the old telephone and brought the receiver to my ear. There was no dial tone at all. The telephone wasn't working. We examined it, only to find that the telephone was only a shell. We hadn't noticed before, but there were no machine parts inside it, let alone a telephone line. By all accounts, it should have never worked in the first place. It was only at a later date that we heard the story surrounding that old well. When the school first opened, students kept ending their lives by throwing themselves down the well. The school tried to bury the well, but everyone who worked on burying it started perishing one after another In the end, the school simply decided to give up on burying the well, and instead renovated the school building itself, extending it in a way that enclosed the well and made it more or less hidden. Still, occasionally, people would come and throw themselves down it. That's why they built the watch cabin. The school stationed a watchman inside to keep an eye on people, to make sure nobody ever went near that well. Thing is, in the end, even the watchman threw himself into it. Since that day, the watch cabin had remained empty. How did the telephone ring that night to warn us about closing the curtains? Better question, who was the man who I spoke to on the phone? I sometimes wonder if it was the old watchman, still standing guard after all those years. I was out hiking alone in Oita Prefecture one afternoon. Time got the better of me, and before I knew it, the sun was already beginning to set. It would already be pitch black by the time I made it halfway to my car. Rather than risk wandering around blindly in the wilderness, I decided it would be a better idea to stay the night at a hotel in one of the nearby towns. There was one I knew nearby, on the other side of a short, high bridge that ran over a small valley. The valley itself was deep and sharp, sheer drops along both sides, and one specific spot along it is relatively famous in the area for being a hot spot for jumpers, people who want to end their lives in a way that is both painless and guaranteed. This is of course tragic, but there are several places like this across the country. Perhaps you've heard of Aokigahara. Every so often, the bodies of jumpers would be found at the bottom of the sheer drop. It's funny, they'd always be found in the exact same spot in the valley, meaning that they all jump from the exact same spot above. That specific point on that specific side of the valley must have held some sort of deep significance that was lost on me. You'd have thought they would have jumped from the bridge itself so as to not hit the jagged rocks on their way down, but this jumping spot was actually a half-mile or so away from the bridge. Perhaps that place was particularly beautiful, or mentioned in some famous haiku or book or something. I never gave it much thought. Anyway, I was hastily making my way through the foliage, trying to reach the bridge before it got too dark to see where I was going. I came to a clearing in the trees, and lo and behold, I saw the bridge ahead of me. Thank God, I thought. I'm exhausted. This hike was a really bad idea. But wait, something wasn't quite right. I crossed this bridge maybe 2 times in the past, and I always remembered there being some sort of small shrine by the bridgehead. Just a small monument to ward off bad spirits and protect all those who cross the bridge. The kind you find all over Japan in various places. I mean, it was possible the shrine had just been removed. The bridge sure looked identical to the one I'd crossed in the past, and I was sure it was meant to be around here somewhere. Still, it just didn't feel the same, not without the shrine. They must have built a second bridge, I theorized. Maybe this town was becoming more popular with tourists, or maybe this one led to a different town altogether. I decided to wander around a little longer, just to check if this was the right bridge or not. I didn't want to cross it only to find out it led to a different town. I walked along the edge of the valley, staying out of the trees to make the most of the remaining sunlight. After about a half-mile of walking, I came across another bridge. This one had the familiar shrine I remembered at the base of the entrance. Tired from the day's journey, I hurriedly made my way over the bridge to the small town on the other side. I stumbled into a guest house and asked the host for a room. Too tired to say anything other than please and thank you, I zombie walked to my bed for the night and fell into a deep sleep. The next morning I awoke feeling refreshed, ready to make my way back to my car, now sure that I knew the quickest route back. At the breakfast table, I got to chatting with the host of the guest house. "Business must be going well these days, huh?" I said to him. "What makes you say that?" he asked. "The bridges. You've built a second one across the valley. I figured it was because you're getting more tourists here." The host looked at me with a serious expression, his eyes large and unblinking. "You saw a second bridge?" he asked me. "Well, yeah, about a half-mile or so from the one I crossed. You haven't seen it before?" "Oh, I've seen it, but not really seen it. You haven't either." I looked at him bewildered. What sort of cryptic thing to say was that? "What do you mean?" I asked him. "It's not really there. The second one. It's a fake bridge. An illusion. Many travelers have asked me about it. Well, the ones that chose to cross the real bridge anyway. You've no doubt heard all the stories of people ending their lives by jumping from the cliffside. Well, the people in this town know they're not jumping on purpose. They're stepping onto the wrong bridge by accident, the one that doesn't exist. As soon as they set foot on it, their bodies fall right through, and they go tumbling over the side of the mountain. That's why the people are always found in the exact same spot. We've put signs up at the start of the second bridge, warning people not to step onto it, that it's just a vision. Every time we plant a sign though, it just mysteriously vanishes. We don't have an explanation for it, for any of it for that matter. In the end, we gave up trying to put warning signs by the second bridge. Instead, we built a shrine by the first. That way, we thought we might be able to help a few superstitious souls pick the right bridge to cross. Are you alright? You've gone quite pale." With that, I paid for my breakfast and rushed out of the guest house without a sound. In hindsight, I wish I had thanked the old host. After all, I had a lot to thank him for. I walked back out of town, making damn sure to cross the same bridge as the evening before. I made it back to my car and never returned to that town again. If you too happen to find yourself in Oita Prefecture and come across a bridge spanning a deep valley, check before you cross it. Pick the left bridge going into town and the right bridge when you leave, and make damn sure there's a shrine at the entrance. In Japanese folklore, Kurokami Sama is both the name of an entity and a ritual. According to legend, Kurokami Sama is a creature that wanders Japan, though the vast majority of sightings are from the Kanto region, particularly Tokyo. Its name describes its appearance, with Kuro meaning black and Kami meaning hair. It remains unclear whether Kurokami is an onryo, namely a vengeful female spirit characterized by long black hair and white clothes, or whether it's simply just a mass of black hair. The ritual involving Kurokami Sama can be performed by anyone who feels like they've been the victim of bullying or power harassment, though performing the ritual isn't without its risks. It should only be conducted by people looking to cause serious harms to those who have treated them unfairly. The sole purpose of the ritual is revenge. Begin by pulling out a strand of your own hair. Now, holding that strand, recite the name of the person or people who have wronged you, along with an explanation of what they've done. Finish by saying, "May these wrongs be avenged." Finally, go up to a high place. Say the words, "Kurokami Sama, please avenge my wrongs," and release the strand of hair so that it falls from the great height. The ritual is now complete. Simple, right? Over the course of the coming days and weeks, those who have wronged you will meet with tragedy in one form or another. Their families may break apart, and they may lose their job or all their savings. They may even lose their minds or fall victim to a terminal disease. Any other number of great misfortunes could befall them. With this ritual, though, comes one simple rule. Once you've performed the ritual, you can never tell another soul about it. If you share the details of the ritual or how to perform it afterwards, even just in passing, those who wronged you will begin to see their lives improve, while yours will become worse and worse. This could result in your demise or disappearance. At least one woman is known to have vanished altogether after divulging how to perform the ritual. Apparently, her whereabouts remains unknown. Kurokami Sama punishes those who abuse their power. As for encountering the Kurokami entity itself on the street, well, if you're a decent person, you should be okay. If you've done anything untoward in the past though, such as treating people badly for no good reason, well, you might not be so lucky. Hey guys, Lazy here, and thank you very much for listening. I'm currently speaking to you from Japan, hence the subject matter for this video. Yeah, I'm here in Sanomiya, Kobe, in a hotel room. So if the audio sounds a little different than usual, that explains why. I'm here visiting my girlfriend, and I figured I might as well make a video about something Japanese, so hey presto, here we go. I hope you enjoyed it. And if you did, let me know, and maybe I can turn this into a series, and who knows, maybe something will come of this. Anyway, a huge shout out to Anthony Salinas for making the thumbnail for this video. A link to all his artwork can be found down in the description, along with a link to my Patreon page. Speaking of Patreon, a huge shout out to all of my supporters who help keep this channel running, especially my biggest supporters. Madison Reinhart, Kelly Rocco, DannyElk, Joshua Lindsey, Darius Saffaie, Nadine, Mitchell Allen Herrera, Sloane Crawford, Sarah Ramirez, Victor Javier Fonseca Ruiz, Maricruz Cedano, AnimeWimp, Crazy MaskParade, James Labour, John Crouch, ProCupidineNata, Gina Valera, Philip Westre, Alex Greensall, Monica Mendoza, Scion of the Emperor, Crawford K McDonald, Ray Price Burton, and Marley Wright. Thank you guys so much for your support. Well, that about wraps things up for this episode, guys. Make sure to keep your eyes peeled for the next video, because I'll be back very, very soon. Until then, guys, you all stay spooky. And remember, the best things happen in the dark. Sayonara.